I drove out to Harrow Creek that morning because of a fuel tank. That's the honest answer. The clinic was 10 miles past the last paved road, which meant my rig had to make the run twice every time we got a call out there, and the reserve gauge had been reading wrong for a month. I wanted to check the fittings before winter. That was all. I had no idea what I was about to walk into. The Harrow Creek Rural Clinic sat in a converted ranch house at the end of a dirt two-track, sagebrush on both sides, high desert country that looked like the edge of the world on an overcast morning. 3 rooms, a generator, a medication cabinet, and 1 nurse who ran the whole operation. I'd been the responding EMT on calls out of that clinic for going on 3 years, and in that time, I'd never once shown up to find the door locked. Not at 6 in the morning, not on a Sunday, not during the ice storm the previous February that drifted the road shut for 4 days. Claire Dade kept that clinic open the way other people keep breathing. When I pulled in, a gray rental sedan was already parked beside the clinic's old truck. The man who got out of it was maybe 25, in a collared shirt and clean shoes, carrying a manila envelope. He introduced himself as Garrett Foss, Regional Administrator's Office, and he shook my hand with the practiced politeness of someone on an errand he didn't enjoy. "You're the EMT?" he said. I told him I was. "You know her? The nurse?" I said I did. He looked down at the envelope and then back up at the clinic door, where Claire was just emerging with a stethoscope around her neck and a mug of coffee in her hand. She was 34 years old, lean, her dark hair pulled back, her face the kind of calm you either have or you don't. She took one look at Garrett Foss and his manila envelope and set the mug on the porch rail. "Mr. Foss," she said. "Ms. Dade." He held the envelope out with both hands, like it might bite him. "I'm sorry to come in person. The director felt it was appropriate, given the circumstances." She took the envelope, opened it, read the single page inside. The wind lifted a corner of it. She read the whole thing before she said anything. "End of the month," she said. "The 15th, he said. 14 days. For the transition." She nodded once, slowly, and I watched her do the math the way I imagined she'd done 100 hard calculations before, clinically, without flinching. "The county's diabetic population in this census tract," she said. "Who covers them?" "The director is working on a mobile unit rotation. Monthly. To start. There's a woman 12 miles east who has a foot wound that needs to be checked every 3 days," she said. "I'll give you her file. You should know that before you leave." Garrett Foss wrote something in a small notebook. I stood there on that gravel lot, feeling like I was watching someone absorb a blow that would have knocked a different person flat, and instead, she was thinking about someone else's foot wound. "The keys," he said, when the silence ran out. She reached into the pocket of her clinic coat. I saw it then, just for a second, as she drew the coat aside, a patch sewn to the inside lining near the chest. Faded fabric, olive drab, a medical cross and a rotor blade design. The kind of thing you'd never see unless you were looking. She didn't call attention to it. She set the clinic keys in his palm, and the key ring made a sound on the gravel when it hit. "I'll need to finish morning rounds," she said. "I have 4 patients arriving, between 8 and 9. Garrett Foss looked at his watch. "Of course, I'll wait." She went back inside, he stayed by his car, and I stood there, not sure why I hadn't left, the fuel gauge issue suddenly feeling very small. I'd known Claire Dade for 3 years, across the radio, and at scene handoffs. The way you know someone when your jobs put you in the same ditches. I knew she was good. I knew she didn't sleep enough. I knew she kept her voice level at scene, no matter what we rolled up on. A crush injury at the Kimball Ranch in 24, when she had a man's femoral artery under her hands for 20 minutes while we drove. A school bus that went off the switchback above Deer Creek and put 9 kids in the meadow on a Tuesday morning, and she triaged all 9 in under 8 minutes, and was right about every single call. I knew she was good, but I didn't know what I didn't know. The 4 patients came and went. I watched them from the gravel lot, because I still hadn't found a reason to leave. An older man with a dressing on his arm, who nodded at me as he climbed out of a dusty pickup, a young mother carrying an infant, 2 ranchers who came together and left arguing about something that had nothing to do with the clinic. Each of them walked in with something wrong, and walked out steadier. Garrett Foss waited by the sedan, checking his phone. The envelope balanced on the roof of his car. At 9:10, Claire stepped back out, pulling the clinic door shut behind her. That was when we heard it. It came from the south, low and fast, a sound you feel in your sternum before you hear it with your ears. I'd grown up near Fort Ellis. I knew that sound. I turned and walked around the side of the clinic, and there it was. A military utility helicopter coming in over the ridge, dropping altitude in a long flat arc toward the open meadow behind the building. The dry grass flattened in a 20-yard circle as it settled. The rotor wash kicked up a wall of dust and dead chamomile. I don't think I moved for 10 seconds. The door opened. The first man out was in army dress greens, a colonel's eagle on his collar, and he was followed by 4 more in the same uniform, and then by 2 men in the darker green of dress service, and then by a figure in a 4-star general's uniform, who stepped down from the skid onto the meadow grass and looked toward the clinic with the unhurried certainty of a man who has always known exactly where he was going. Claire came around the corner of the clinic and stopped. The general crossed the field at a measured walk. When he was 20 feet from her, he halted, and the men behind him halted, and he stood there for a moment just looking at her. Not the way you look at someone you're assessing, but the way you look at someone you've been waiting to find. "Lantern," he said. It wasn't a question, it was a name. She stood straight. Something in her posture shifted, not stiffening, but settling, the way a person settles when they're finally standing on ground they recognize. "General Morrow," she said. He extended his hand and she took it, and then he did something I didn't expect. He held on to it. Not a grip, not a pumping handshake. He just held her hand in both of his and looked at her, and for the first time in 3 years of watching Claire Dade work, I saw her eyes go bright. "7 years out here," he said. "Yes, sir." "You kept the whole region alive," he said. "Same as you kept us alive." He reached back, and one of the colonels stepped forward and placed a leather-bound folder in his hand. The general opened it, and I was close enough now to see the document inside, a citation on Army letterhead, dense with detail, and at the top a name, Day, CR, and a series of dates and designations that meant nothing to me, but clearly meant a great deal to the men behind him. He read from it, not quietly, clearly, the way you read something you want a record of. Flight nurse, aeromedical evacuation, 3 combat deployments. He named provinces, named dates, named aircraft designations. I couldn't parse, but that made the colonels behind him go still. Mass casualty event, Paktika province, where she had coordinated triage for 22 wounded over 4 hours in a damaged aircraft, while the flight crew worked to get them airborne again. She had held 2 men in traumatic arrest with the equipment she could reach, improvising with what the aircraft had and what her hands knew. 11 critical, all 11 survived. She had received a commendation that, according to the general's reading, had been waiting in administrative processing for 6 years because she had not pushed for it, because she had been too busy doing the next thing. Garrett Foss had come around the corner of the building. He was standing 8 feet to my right, the manila envelope in one hand and a pen in the other, and he was absolutely still. The general finished reading and closed the folder. He held it out to her. She took it with both hands. Then the colonel to his left stepped forward, and the 4 men behind him stepped forward, and without a word they formed a line, and one by one, in sequence, in the flat morning light of that meadow at the end of a dirt road 30 miles from anywhere, they raised their hands to the brims of their covers and saluted her. She returned it, steady, unhurried, her chin up. The wind went through the dry grass. The helicopter sat silent behind them. I had been doing this job for 6 years, and I had been at scenes that put things in me that don't move, but I am not ashamed to say that standing in that field, I could not find any words for what I was looking at. I just watched. When the salutes came down, the general spoke again, quieter this time. "The director of the regional network has been contacted," he said. "The clinic will remain open. We've been in conversation with 3 federal programs about a permanent funding designation." He paused. "You should have had this 6 years ago." "I was busy," she said. The general made a sound that I think, in a different man, in a different place, would have been a laugh. "Yes," he said, "you were." He looked at Garrett Foss then. Just a glance, brief, quiet, the kind of look that doesn't need words because the situation has already said everything. Garrett Foss looked down at the envelope in his hands, and didn't look back up. The general turned back to Claire. "Is there anything you need out here?" She thought about it, and I could see her running the list. The same list she'd been running alone for 7 years, in a converted ranch house at the end of a dirt road, where the county's mobile unit came once a month on a good day. "A better fuel gauge on the EMT rig," she said. "He's been running it too close." She looked at me when she said it, and her eyes were still bright. And that steadiness was back. The steadiness I'd been calling calm for 3 years without understanding what it was built on. I opened my mouth and closed it. The general looked at me. "That," he said, "we can manage." They stayed another 20 minutes. There were handshakes, and quiet words I wasn't close enough to hear, and Claire walked back to the clinic door with the citation folder under her arm, like it was a patient chart she'd been handed at shift change. Business to attend to. The next thing. Garrett Foss found me by my rig, as the helicopter climbed back above the ridge. "Who was she?" he said. He was still holding the envelope. I thought about the answer. I thought about 3 years of radio calls from this place, about the way her voice sounded at a crush injury versus a cardiac event versus a pediatric trauma. Always the same register, always the same weight to it, always the measure of someone who had been in worse and come through. I thought about the patch sewn to the inside of her clinic coat that she'd never once mentioned. "She was the nurse out here," I said. "That's all I knew." He looked at the envelope for a long time. Then he folded it in half and put it in his jacket pocket, and he got in the rental car and drove back the way he'd come. I didn't leave right away. I sat on the running board of my rig and watched the high desert sky close back over where the helicopter had been, and I thought about what the general had read aloud. 11 critical, all 11 survived. And I thought about the woman who had done that, and then come out here to do it again, every day, without the dress uniforms and the leather-bound folder, without anyone knowing to call her Lantern. I think about it every time I drive that road. The clinic is still open. I checked the fuel gauge the following week, and I never called her just the nurse out there again. Not to dispatch, not to the county health office, not to anyone. I didn't have a better word for what she was, so I used her name. Claire Dade. That was enough.